All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Samara Zimmerly with the Worcester Chamber, and we want to thank you for joining us this morning. We know that things have been challenging the past almost year now for everyone, but especially for our small business community. We as a chamber hear your frustrations when it comes to hiring and workforce, and we completely understand, and that's why we're really excited to have this webinar this morning. We have Julie Kastner from Ethos HR Consulting with us, and she's going to talk about tackling essential hiring issues for small business. We are going to keep the chat box open if you want to type in questions, and then there'll also be time for questions at the end. So welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much. I so appreciate, Samira, your invitation to come and talk with you. As you mentioned, I run a small HR consulting company. I also am an HR manager in a private sector. I've been, in the government sector, the public sector. I've run nonprofits. I've been around for a little while, and HR is kind of my passion. But I'm going to be honest with you when I say HR right now is challenging, and you're likely on this webinar because hiring has been an issue for you, or you're facing or thinking about hiring that's coming here in the future. So I'm hoping to give you just some insights, some things to be thinking about, some pointers. Katie, I believe, is going to email you out both the PowerPoint as well as a reference document that I think is good to have in your hands. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully things work as we intend, and we're going to get started with the PowerPoint. So what we're going to be talking today is, again, tackling essential hiring issues. And really what we're going to be focusing on is why hiring is so hard, and what you can do on the front end of the employment life cycle with your candidates and your employees, and why I believe that so many businesses miss the mark on protecting their brand and really employee engagement, and the things that you can do. I mean, this is a webinar about what you can be doing to make hiring less difficult. So with that, let's talk about, hopefully my PowerPoint's going to work. So let's talk about why hiring is hard. First of all, there's a myth right now that it's hard only because COVID is out there. And certainly COVID has complicated all of our lives. If you have employees that have been affected by COVID, obviously that can be extremely traumatic. If you yourself have been affected, or family members or have lost loved ones, or they've been really sick, you understand the depth and breadth to which COVID can affect. From a business perspective, it's complicated how we engage with our employees. We're doing this more than ever before. We're not together. We're not sharing ideas. We don't have that indirect knowledge exchange that happens when you're just popping from office to office talking to your colleagues. So COVID has really affected how we do business, but it's also affected hiring. But I want to be really clear with everybody. Hiring was hard before COVID ever happened, and hiring is going to be difficult when we're entering this post-COVID new normal, when shots are in arms. We're going to return to a period of time where we're still having issues with onboarding and finding good quality talent to make our businesses successful. So what were some of the reasons before this? Competition for talent was certainly one of those areas. In January and February of 2020, before COVID really kind of came down and hit us, unemployment in the state of Ohio was in the 3 to 4% range, which really basically meant if we wanted talent, we were poaching it from other companies, and we had to offer something that was more valuable than what they currently had. And we also had to have the hope that there were people that were looking for work. At a 3 or 4% unemployment, most everybody that wanted to be employed was. And so the competition for talent was real. In a post-COVID world, we're going to have a different kind of squeeze. Right now, while unemployment's a little bit higher, we still have competition for talent, in part because people aren't returning to the workforce and they're not applying for the jobs that we might be putting out there, in part because folks have left the workforce or they're receiving enhanced unemployment. I'm sure some of us have dealt with employees that it's hard to get them back because potentially they're making as much or potentially a little bit more earning the enhanced unemployment, so they're not returning to the workforce. So though unemployment is higher, we're still competing for the talent that's out there, and we have to compete well. And we're going to talk about that today. One of the other reasons hiring was hard, and I think every employer out there has heard this, drug testing. I can't find somebody that can pass a drug test. And background checks. They're yielding more hits than ever because data is just simply more available to us. The use of recreational marijuana is far outweighing what it used to. And a lot of jobs have decided that we wanted to have these as policy decisions about hiring competent people for our companies. One of the things you're going to hear me repeat throughout this webinar is business case. Do you have a business case for drug testing? Do you have a business case for background checks? This is something that excludes part of the workforce. I'm just putting that out there. You can decide, obviously, for your company what is necessary. If you have heavy labor, if you have people that are driving company vehicles, operating tow motors, CDL drivers, caring for children, obviously you have reasons why you don't want employees to fail a drug test. And if you have a background check as part of your process, I'm going to always ask you, what's the business case for it? Does it matter that somebody might have had a third-degree felony 5 years ago and maybe has changed their life? They now have received training, education, they've gone on. Make sure you've connected the dots on why you need to exclude people, because there's more hits than ever. And as those hits accumulate, it again has the potential to limit your workforce. So be thinking what your business case is for those. And another thing that we need to think about is wages in our areas and surrounding areas. Wayne County is sort of in this valley, I'm going to put it, when it comes to wages. Not all cases, but in a lot of cases, we have to realize that some of our wages are not as competitive as those in the metro areas that are within a drivable distance from our companies. So we're really competing for talent that can easily drive to Akron, Canton, some of the Cleveland suburbs, even some of the companies over in Mansfield. I mean, you wouldn't think that it's considered a metro area, but it actually is. Some companies, because they're in a metro area and drivable, are presenting issues to us for why it's hard to find and attract talent. So what we're going to talk about in the next few slides is what we can do as employers to beef up our hiring process, increase our brand worth, and attract that talent. And I'm really going to focus on the front end of the employment life cycle. And what I mean about that, we'll see in a second. It is why this, I think, is an underestimated part of the hiring process and why we really need to tackle it. So the guiding philosophy behind this presentation is this: your future employees' engagement and their opinion of your company, your brand, it begins in the hiring process. And I want you to really spend some time thinking about that, because if you're underprepared, if you're dismissive of the process, if you are disinterested or too busy to focus on building relationships with potential candidates, you're missing the mark in your hiring process. And when I say potential new employee and potential candidates, I'm talking about everybody that might be applying for a job with your company. How you treat the incoming applications, how you engage with them in follow-up. Do you ghost them on Indeed because they didn't match your criteria? All of that is brand reflective on you. So make sure you are thinking about the hiring process as part of your corporate image, your company's image that you're putting out to the public, because potential employees, that's word of mouth. If they were treated poorly in the hiring process at your company, believe me, they've got 5 friends that they're going to share that with. Hey, I put an application in with company A, never heard from them. They're going to tell a friend that. And is friend going to want to apply to company A? You may have just damaged your chance of finding a potentially good candidate by not protecting your brand and your company all the way through the hiring process. Okay. So today, what we're going to focus on is beginning with the end in mind. We're going to talk about what is the abject reason that you're doing this process. What are we trying to hire? How do we want to accomplish this? And we're going to start with the end in mind. We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about effective job descriptions and essential functions or key responsibility statements, why these are so important and how often they are overlooked. It's astounding to me, but it is something, again, I really want you to take some time to focus on. Writing impactful job advertisements and using job boards wisely. There are so many choices out there, and what you do for each one of them should be tailored to the outcomes that you're seeking. We're going to talk about navigating the interview process, and there's going to be a resource document that Katie is going to share with you that's going to help with some interview questions that can really kind of keep you out of the weeds and not get in trouble. And then we're going to talk about impactful onboarding of new hires and why that is an overlooked part. Again, all of this is on the front end of the employment life cycle. And the employment life cycle starts in this greenish and blue areas. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. But what you do there is going to carry all the way through the life cycle of having that employee attached to your company. And if you do this part well and you put planning and thought into it, you're going to find that when you evaluate and develop and encourage and recognize an employee, hopefully you will be cutting down on that yellow key, which is the farewell, and the turnover, which is the part that is so costly to employers, okay? So let's begin with the end in mind. First step that I want to talk to you about, planning and preparation for a job opening. Most of our instincts when we realize there is a pile of work over here that needs to get done is, I need help. Boom, I'm going to put a job title and a 4 points bullet out on Indeed and say, let's just see what happens. I am going to tell you, this is where we go awry. So before you post the job, I want you to think about the following things. First of all, do you have an ideal employee that is already in this position? Okay, let's say we've got Susie and she is an amazing administrative assistant. Susie has given you the appropriate 2 weeks notice, and what you really need is another administrative assistant exactly like Susie. I want Susie the sequel. Okay, just get me another Susie. Then you have to ask your question, well, do you have an employee in this position? And maybe she's not great. Maybe Susie wasn't the best administrative assistant that you had, and you need somebody with some upscale skills that Susie maybe didn't possess. So maybe Susie was lacking, really tight database knowledge, or maybe you would like somebody that's better at crystal reports, or maybe you would like somebody that has the ability to actually run a project, and that was a limitation that Susie had. So what you're really looking for is Susie version 2.0. She was the administrative assistant, but you need something different from her. The other option is this a new position? Are you adding something that in your company has never existed before? And we're going to call that John the Beta test, where you're really starting from scratch and you have to figure out, what do I do with this pile of work over here that I need to hire? But instead of just pulling out of the air a job title and a couple of skills that you need and posting it on Indeed, this is where we need to do the planning process. If you have an employee currently in the position that you are looking to hire, and they give you the benefit of 2 weeks notice, utilize it. The first thing you should be giving them is a piece of paper and asking them to write down every single task that they do on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. Just a task list. They don't have to put in great thought to it, but get in their brain before they leave. Please tell me every single thing that you do, because I need to analyze what I'm doing moving forward. This is called job analysis. And in an HR field, we would normally be doing this on a regular basis. But for those of you that are in small businesses and you don't have an HR person, this is something you need to do. Capture what that person does on a daily basis. It's not a bad idea, side tip, to have your employees, even if they're not leaving you, do this anyway. Okay, that's a really key thing. The other thing I would do is, if you have an existing job description, even if it's Susie the sequel and you love her and you basically want to replicate her, give her that job description and say, could you go through this and let me know if anything on this has changed since once we hired you. If it's been 5 years since Susie was hired, odds are she's added a few things to her job from her original job description. Get her to update it. And then you gather that task list and you gather that job description, and then you evaluate, is this what I need? Is this what I, the employer that's hiring, actually need, in addition to what Susie views the job as being? If it's a new position, I'm going to encourage you to go out, and it's the last bullet point on this slide, to do some market research, okay? There's a link on this. It's going to take you out to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's for our area, for the state of Ohio. Pull up the job title or the job description of the position that you think is what you want, and then compare it to what you believe your needs actually are. Do a little bit of research on the front end before you post that job description. I can't stress this enough, because you are going to get what you plan for. And if you don't plan well, you're going to get an employee potentially that is not prepared to deliver for you what it is your company actually needs. The other thing I want to make sure that you have done on the front end is, have you set a hiring budget? Okay, and by this, I mean, do you know what you're going to be willing to spend in advertising? Some of the job boards that are out there, if you're going to advertise for a position, it will bump it up higher in the list so more applicants will be able to see it. Have you planned how much you want to spend per week, per day, per month, depending on how long you feel like you have to advertise for it? Make sure you also know what the salary and the benefits are going to look like for this company, or for this position within your company. If you're not prepared to talk about your salary and your benefits with a potential candidate early on in the process, you're missing the mark. There are candidates that will overlook your job application simply because they don't know what they're applying for. Okay, so make sure you've thought those things through before you move on. Why are job descriptions and essential functions important? So you've gathered this information, you're now looking at the job description and the key functions that this job needs, and you're getting ready and you're getting closer to being ready to advertise, but this is the next step. I'm making sure you've got a well-crafted job description and essential function statements. From the candidate's perspective, and people that are going to be applying for this job, they need to know what they're applying for. They need to know that thought has been given to the job itself, and they understand fully when they click on, I'm going to apply for this job, what it is that's going to be asked of them. They need to know how are they going to be assessed and how are they going to be successful in this job. If you go into a job and you don't know what's being expected of you, how do you know if you're any good at it? How do you know if there's going to be job advancement? How do you know what the expectations really are? Do they have the skills and education that is required to do the job? If that is left off of your job description and your essential function statement, and that's not a section that you put out there that a high school diploma or an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or some kind of technical training is left off, if you need a particular certification and you don't put that in your job advertisement, you're setting this up for wasted time and failure on your part and the candidate's part. And are there physical requirements and limitations to the job? Are they expected to lift something over 50 pounds? Or are they going to be regularly moving things that are 100 pounds? Are they going to be exposed to the elements? Those are things that they need to know in their job description, okay? And why is this important from the employer's perspective? In addition to everything that you just did for the candidate, it's also important that you know and have identified what are the key responsibilities early in this process. It will inform your expectations as an employer. What are the performance goals going to be? And it keeps everybody on the same page. Some additional things about job descriptions and essential functions that you really have to make sure you understand. It serves as the basis for the job advertisements that we're going to talk about next. This is a result of all of the planning stages that you've done, from getting the task list and the initial review of the job description by Susie, the administrative assistant. Now you can definitively lay out the plan from that planning stage. It also critically becomes the reference document. That job description and the essential function statements that you have now crafted becomes a reference document for things like unemployment claims, for workers' comp claims, for discipline issues, for future performance evaluations, and for wage and compensation reviews. Okay, so this planning that you're doing for this pile of work over here that you need accomplished becomes the basis for some big things down the line. So it is really, really worth it to do this upfront work to get yourself ready to actually engage with potential candidates. Okay, does that make sense? I'm hoping it does. If it doesn't, type those comments into the chat section and we'll get to them, I promise. We're going to leave some time. So things that job descriptions and essential functions should definitely contain: clear description of key responsibilities. Make sure that hours and shift information is available to them. Make sure if there's a chain of command or you're expecting them to have supervisory responsibilities, that's laid out in your job description. Make sure that there's wage and benefit information that's included, starting wage or range of salary, and what benefits are going to be included in that. I don't know why employers are afraid to talk money with their candidates, but I personally, if I'm interviewing for a job, I don't want to wait until the third interview or the final offer is made to find out that what I'm about to offer this candidate is way below what they're expecting. Those conversations and that information should be available early on. And a lot of employers hold that back, saying, I'm going to play with the wages based on what somebody expects to come in. That's poor planning. What if you find the candidate that you absolutely love and they want $30,000 a year more than what you're prepared to pay? You have invested a lot of time in this hiring process that you didn't need to, because you're never going to be on the same page. Nobody's going to have that kind of room in their budget to come up that level. And that employee, potentially, there's no way they're going to come down. So put your information out there, and it should be a part of your job description and essential function. What are the required skills in education? We talked about that. And if there's environmental requirements, are they going to be exposed to the elements? Are they going to be exposed to hazardous working conditions? Are there lifting requirements? Those kind of things really are important. And they become key things, especially on workers' comp claims, because if somebody is off because of an injury and they have to be returned to duty, what's in their job description absolutely makes a difference, whether they're returning to light duty, whether they're able to return to work at all. And doctors typically need a copy of their job description in order to know what they can do. Things that they absolutely should not contain. These are the no's. Don't do this. Don't have long, ambiguous, clever job titles like I'm a people manager or I'm, CEO of people. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Keep it simple, keep it understandable, and keep it something that makes sense to the people that you're hiring. It also can be age discriminatory if you're using cute, new, young titles for jobs that older people in the workforce may not understand, like tech ninja. Okay, that's one of those things where folks, maybe over a certain age, they may have the skills, but I don't know what the heck a tech ninja is. My 20-year-old daughter might know what a tech ninja is. I, in my 50s, may not know what it is, but I might actually have more tech skills than she does, but I wouldn't apply for that job. And that could actually be challenged as a form of age discrimination. Don't be excessively wordy in your job description. You don't need to write a dissertation or a thesis on this. You need to have bullet points that are meaningful. Say what you mean what you say. Don't include a long about us section. I know your company is wonderful. Everybody knows your company is wonderful. But if you've got 4 paragraphs about how wonderful your company is before you get to the point where you're describing the job that the employee is applying for, it can force them to lose interest and make them think this is more about the company than it is about bringing me on. Don't put a lot of legalese into your job descriptions. That's not the time nor place for it. And it gives people some concern that they're applying for a job that they maybe can't do. Watch for gender-based references. Don't put in, I'm looking for a salesman. Okay, get that? Salesman. Salesperson. Okay, make sure you're reviewing your job descriptions, your job titles for a gender neutral perspective, and also watch for bias. Make sure that your job descriptions don't have any hint of age, race, disability, sexual orientation. None of that bias can be written into your job description. So review them with a critical eye for those kind of things. So let's talk now about, you've got this great job description and you're ready to move on to job advertisement and job boards. And I'm telling you, there are more job advertisements and job boards out there. You can post a job just about anywhere. And probably some of you have used a number of these. One of the resources, and they're terribly close to my heart because I was the business administrator at Job and Family Services for 4 years, is the OhioMeansJobs.com resource. They work with a lot of these other job boards, and there's a team of very dedicated professionals down there. If you don't know who Crystal Brown is, that heads up the workforce development program at Ohio Means Jobs, please reach out to her and tell her Julie sent you. She is fantastic, as is her team, about helping you work with crafting an appropriate job advertisement for these different types of job boards. For instance, if you are writing a job description that's going to go to ZipRecruiter, that's going to be a very different type of employee that you're going after. That's going to be executive. That's going to be somebody that's putting themselves out there for a recruiter. I would use a ZipRecruiter for very different purposes and provide very detailed job description of what I'm looking for, because they're going to go out and look for people and send them to me. So I want to provide them as much information as I can. Indeed is somewhere that I would go for maybe mid-level executives all the way down to, blue collar workforce. LinkedIn, you're going to be doing kind of high level, because a machine press operator is probably not on LinkedIn. So understand that there's going to be different audiences for the different job boards that you use, and make sure that your job advertisement is based in reality on the job description that you just got done writing. So the things that were the key responsibilities, the wage information, the skills and abilities, all of those things should be to some extent in your job advertisement. I've seen people go so far as to take their entire job description and use that as their posting. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you've done all this front work on developing a clear, concise job description. And now you're putting it out there and you're saying, if you're interested in applying for this position, I'm right here, I'm up front, and I'm telling you, this is what you're signing on for. Informed candidates are going to yield for you a better audience and better applications to sort through than an ambiguous, short, nondescript, I'm throwing something out on Indeed because I just need to start getting some applications in. You're going to waste your time and theirs drudging through all of those different applications if it's not based on the concrete stuff that you have done in the planning process. I hope that makes sense to folks, because you can throw advertisements out in a lot of different places, but if you do it purposefully and well crafted, it's going to yield a better audience for you in terms of what you have to go through and screen for. So let's talk about the interviewing process here for a second, because this is the next step. You've got candidates and you're looking through them and you're ready to bring a couple in because you think they are a good match. A recent survey by Career Builder found that approximately 20% of hiring managers reported that at some point during their interviewing, they asked a question that possibly violated the law. So asking questions during the interview process obviously is very important, but like everything else I'm telling you today, your preparation for the interview is key, okay? Don't just wing it. I can't tell you how many employers just say, I'm just going to wait for a gut feeling. I'm going to bring them in. We're going to have a little talk. We're going to see. So tell me about your last job. So tell me why you want to work for this job. Tell me about your family. Tell me this. And then 4 or 5 questions and a half an hour later, they've decided to make this massive investment of time and resources in a person. And they were really underprepared. Think about the job, think about all of the work that you've gone into figuring out what are these key responsibilities, what are these essential functions I need them to be doing, and then ask them questions based on can they perform to those specific tasks. Prepare for the interview, write down your questions in advance, make sure they're open-ended, make sure it gives the employee opportunities to talk and tell you about experiences they've had. One of my favorite questions when it comes to managing people is, tell me about the best manager you've ever had. Tell me about the worst manager you've ever had. And leave it open-ended like that and allow them to talk. That's going to tell you an awful lot about how they are going to respond to different management styles, just on an open-ended question like that. Always make sure there is a business case for your questions. There's no reason I should be asking a potential candidate, so where'd you go to high school? What's the business reason for that? And I'll tell you where that gets you into trouble. And there's a PDF that Katie's going to send to you with appropriate and inappropriate questions that I'm going to help you with. Asking questions like that, where'd you go to high school? What year did you graduate? Guess what you just figured out by what year you graduated? You found out how to find them on social media, and you've also found out their age. You're going to get yourself into a whole lot of trouble. Tell me about your family. All of a sudden you're digging into whether or not they have kids, and is childcare going to be an issue, and what schedule can they work? Make sure the questions that you need to ask them is about their ability to perform on the job and the job description and essential functions you've placed in front of them. It's nice to get to know them. It's easy to be friendly, but as the employer, you have to walk a fine line between being too friendly in the interviewing process and finding out too many things that can be considered discriminatory or bias your opinion on whether you hire them, versus just having a pleasant conversation with somebody. Take notes during the interview process and compare applicants using consistent criteria. What I mean by that is, if you have a set of written questions that you plan to ask, make sure you use that set of written questions for each applicant, and then take notes and compare them. Many people use their gut feelings alone. I liked a person during an interview. I didn't like a person in an interview. I liked what they were wearing. I didn't like what they were wearing. That has nothing to do with whether or not they can execute the work that is being asked of them, that pile of work over here that you are looking to hire somebody to help you with. Make sure you're using a consistent criteria and you're avoiding that just gut feelings alone. So you've gone through the interviewing process and you found the right one. You're so excited. Now what do you do with them? And this is another area where we drop off with our employees as they're bringing them on board. You have to plan an onboarding process for them, and you have to plan it before you've made the hire. Know what it is you want from them and make sure that you're carefully bringing them on board, because at the point that you call them and you make that offer, everybody's excited about this job. Everybody wants this job. This is going to work out. It's going to be amazing. And where we tend to lose our employees and start that turnover process is the disengagement within the first 2 weeks that you have an employee come on board. Make sure when you bring them in that their workspace, their technology, their email, their phone, make sure it's all set up for them. Nobody wants to arrive on day one and feel like an outsider, or that nobody knew that they were coming, that they weren't expected, that you haven't done just the courteous things to plan for them. If they're going to be working remote for you, are you providing a laptop? You still want to make sure that, if there's a phone allowance, if they're make sure those questions are answered for them so that they understand on day one, okay, I'm stepping into something that they are prepared and ready for. Make sure you plan key introductions and schedule meetings for them. Are there coworkers that they have that you need to make sure that in that first week or two, you're blocking off time for them to sit and get to know, or job shadow, or spend time observing what they're doing? And make sure that you, as the onboarding person, is scheduling that for them. Don't make this a great scavenger hunt for your new hire to go figure out based on clues what it is they're supposed to be doing. Plan lunches and breaks for them with their new colleagues. Nobody wants to be that kid that shows up for the first day of school and they don't know who they're going to eat with. Even if they're working remotely, plan to pack a lunch and have them pack a lunch and do a Zoom call with them and just have that collegial time together, where you now as a new employee are starting to build and form relationships. All of this is about engagement of new hires to make sure that they actually are feeling engaged and part of your company. Call them the night before their first day. Make sure they know where to park if they're coming to a physical office. This is where you're going to park. Let's go over dress code so you know what you're supposed to wear. Who's going to meet them at the door? Are there going to be keys? Are there security issues to get in? If it's the night before they come on board, send them a quick message and say, hey, I'm really looking forward to working with you tomorrow. This is what time we'll be on our first Zoom call. Bring a cup of coffee. I'm looking forward to sitting down with you. Make them feel welcome. And I would highly recommend that you have a well thought out, planned schedule, at least for the first 1 to 2 weeks that you're working with this new hire. Before you set them free and give them wings to sort of fly, make sure you have given them an agenda with all of these things that you expect, so that you're scaffolding from new employee up to where they feel they can start to work on their own. So these are some tips that I'm giving all of you, because what you do in the green sections of this employment life cycle really, really matter for how that employee is going to stay engaged as you move forward. It's also going to, as you start to do this as a regular practice, it's going to build the reputation of your company as a great place that I want to be working with them. We all want to be what we call employers of choice, where the reputation on the street, word on the street is, this is a company that I want to work for. If you have attracted good talent through an open and responsive and informed and detailed upfront planning process, you're going to attract the right talent. People are going to want to come and work with you. If, as you bring that new hire on board, they have a clear set of expectations, they know how they're going to be engaging with their colleagues, and they know how they're going to be evaluated for success in terms of what is going to be asked of them on the job, and you bring them on board in a warm and engaging way, and they feel that they are connecting with your company right from the get-go, the purple stages, the red stages, the orange stages are going to likely be a lot easier to navigate. And we spend a lot of time talking about performance evaluations and learning and development and training opportunities and how we encourage and give recognition to our employees. But you got to get the right employee in there first. So I'm hoping that the purpose of today's webinar gave you some good information. You're all going to have a copy of the PowerPoint here. And I'm going to put up my contact information, and we're going to open up to any questions that you might have for me. You can certainly reach out to me by email or cell phone. If we have not already connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to find me there as well. And I'm Samira, I'm going to turn this back over to you. And if there's anything more that I can do for folks, this is a great time to just bounce questions off of me about what your challenges are. I wanted to leave enough time to chat, because I'm sure if you're here, it's because you have questions.
We did have one question that was submitted.
Okay.
Can you speak to the practice of some companies now not offering positive or negative referrals when checking out references? I know it is a liability issue, but it would sure be helpful.
Agreed. It would absolutely be helpful. And some companies adopt a very strict policy. When you call them, they're only going to tell you, yes, this person worked for me, these were the dates of hire, and this was the position title that they held. And they usually can also provide you salary information. I would always encourage people to ask an open-ended question to the person that's you get them on the phone. I know that it is more convenient to send emails for referrals to other companies and have them reply virtually. I'm going to tell you, I'm old school on this. If you have the time to pick the phone up and call the reference, do it. The reference is there because that person is identified by your candidate as somebody that should be able to speak to their professionalism. Call them. Ask them, hey, did this person work for you? Confirm the dates, confirm the salary. What else can you tell me about them? As a new person taking on Susie or John as a new hire, I'm really excited about them. They've told me some things that I'm really interested in, and open with that question. If they're hard and fast on their own policy that they're not going to tell you anything more, there's really not much that you can do. But I always ask that open-ended question. So what can you tell me about them? I mean, I'm really excited. I think there might be a good fit, because you're probably not calling these references before you're thinking that they're a good fit. Give them a chance to talk. And quite often, I find more often than not, they do. And if they absolutely can, if their company is hard and fast on it, you're not going to get much out of them. Call the next reference. I highly encourage calling more than one reference. I know it's time consuming, but you're making this huge investment in a person. It is worth getting as much background as you can. Having said that, do not go trolling for information on social media. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. You can identify somebody's gender, race, age by trolling their Facebook page, their Instagram, even their LinkedIn can kind of give you, but that's a professional site, and LinkedIn has been a little more protected than some of the things that happen on social media. So watch how much you do trolling for a potential candidate. That's not really where you want to go for your information there. Okay.
Another question, our company started using SNAP evaluations. Any comment on this?
I am not familiar with SNAP evaluations. If that person would like to tell me a little bit more about that, that's not something that I'm familiar with.
Okay. We will give them time to respond
Sure.
with that information. Is it okay, legal, appropriate to record an interview?
as long as the candidate knows that you're doing it and agrees to it. I would have a document that you would ask them to sign, saying, hey, I recorded this so that I can go back and review it later, because, you know, my mind is not always sharp, and I would just want to make sure I have, you know, the ability to do it. But I would always, if you don't get their permission to do it, I would not do it. But I would let them know that this is our practice and we would like to record this so that we can come back and review it. Yep.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, let's see. So the SNAP evaluations, it's immediate feedback through email on jobs, could be weekly instead of 6-month or annual.
Oh, you're talking about using SNAP evaluations as an ongoing form of evaluating your hire?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When it comes to evaluations, and again, this is, you know, post the hiring process, so we'll talk about that here for just a second. I am a big believer in giving continual feedback to your employees. I think annual evaluations are a joke. That you have that horns and halos situation that happens on annual evaluations, and typically we only remember the last 1 to 3 months of an employee's performance. And if you're not a great manager about documenting things as it's happening, and you're keeping a file where you can go back and review the year, I think, honestly, I think annual evaluations, unless they're tied to, I just have to give an overall assessment of many evaluations I've done along the way, so that, you know, I can increase somebody's wages. I think annual evaluations are not worth the paper they're written on. I don't know about a weekly evaluation. I mean, if there's definite performance targets and you can give them, you know, feedback, hey, you know, you're missing the mark, you know, we were under production by 20%. Let's see what we can do the next week. Yeah, that's definitely helpful. I mean, anytime an employee can be given feedback on how they're doing, I think it sets the bar for what our expectations are for them. So I would absolutely encourage regular feedback. And again, not everybody has email to get a SNAP feedback like that, but I certainly think managers should be engaging with their employees frequently. You know, whether it's a 15-minute once a month sit down, you know, where I can give you, hey, you know, these are some of the things you did great this month. I'd like to see, as we move into the next month, improvement in these areas. And then you make some kind of documentation on that. So when you sit down the next time, you can say, hey, you know, I told you last month I really wanted you to improve in these 3 areas, and I saw improvement in 2. Can we keep working on the 3rd area? That kind of continual feedback, it keeps engagement high with your employment, and ultimately results in better outcomes for the employer, for sure.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered your question. I hope it did.
So we have another one here. I noticed you had Facebook as one of your job boards. Doesn't that blur the line for trolling at the same time you are looking for an employee?
Yes, it does. And it's not one of my favorite job boards that are out there. Absolutely, it blurs the line. And my experience with the Facebook job boards has not been great. And though I have not had somebody run up against a legal challenge on it, just know that it is out there, and it has been challenged in the courts in the past, the use of social media prior to a hire. So I absolutely, so when I saw that Facebook was really starting to kind of beef up their job boards, I absolutely encourage the employers that I work with to be very cautious about that. Because as you go back to Facebook and you click on that person, it's going to take you right to their site. And yes, it is a very gray, blurry, you're absolutely right, line that I would not recommend employers cross. So that's just my personal recommendation. I'm not a huge fan, but it is out there as a potential job board. Yeah, for sure. So good point. Whoever wrote that, nice catch. You're absolutely right.
All right. Well, if there are not any other questions here now, I think Julie has her contact information to share, and we'll also make sure that Katie sends a follow-up email with that information as well. So feel free to reach out to Julie, you know, if you want to discuss things further. Julie, thank you so much for joining us today. You shared a lot of great information, so we really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, my
And
pleasure.
we'll continue to host these kind of webinars to try to help our business community. So if there's any suggestions that you have of topics that you'd like to see us cover, definitely let us know. Give us a call, shoot us an email. We're always trying to find new ways to help our business community. So thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your day.